Syria has lashed out at the United States for a whole range of crimes and violations, including the pillage of the Arab nation's resources. The Syrian foreign minister said the US and its allied militant groups have been looting oil, wheat and cotton in the northeastern Al Jazeera region. Faisal al-Maghdad also slammed the US for destroying and committing crimes in Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor provinces under the pretext of fighting Daesh terrorists. He said the Takfiri terrorists are still present in northeastern Syria under US support. Washington has retained nearly 1,000 of its troops in northeastern Syria, saying a military exit is unlikely anytime soon. Maghdad pointed to US and Western sanctions against Syria, describing them as illegitimate and self-serving. James Jatras is a former diplomat and foreign policy analyst and joins us now from Washington, D.C. James, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Pillage of resources is among the accusations being labeled here against the United States. And when we look at where American forces are stationed near the Euphrates River in the east of the country, that's where Syria's oil is.
That's right. And let's keep in mind that these resources that are being pillaged are not in any way benefiting the United States or the American people. The purpose is to deny them to the Syrian people, to inflict more hardship on Syria. For many months now, since it's become clear that Damascus has won the war against the terrorists supported by Washington and some of our allies, many people have been predicting, well, it's now inevitable that the United States will be getting out of Syria, getting out of Iraq, like we got out of Afghanistan. But you notice we're not doing that these people are not used to failure. They overthrew successfully the government of Iraq, the government of Libya. Here is a country now that has resisted that, and they just will not give up, even though it's clear to everybody that they have lost.
So the idea, James, is to prevent Damascus from using oil revenue, for example, to rebuild the country, to restore vital services to the country? Is that?
Yes, absolutely. This is just another step of a war of attrition against Syria and the Syrian people to not only deny them oil revenue, but also, for example, grain resources, to the full use of the waters of the Euphrates. I mean, this is simply kind of a siege warfare of resources to inflict more hardship and death and destruction and sickness on the Syrian people.
Okay, James, we know America doesn't have a UN mandate to be in Syria, nor an invitation from the government in Damascus. In your opinion, what is the purpose of the American occupation?
You're right, of course, it has no international mandate under international law. It's not even legal under American domestic law. This is a totally illegal operation, but nobody in America cares, and even the political class is fully united behind it, even though it's an illegal occupation. And the reason is these people think they're playing geostrategic politics in favor of the Israelis, against the Russians, against the Iranians. They see Syria as simply a piece on a chessboard that if it cannot be won by the American side, well, then it's better off being destroyed. And that's what the policy is right now.
And again, just finally, James, on that note, when we look at where American forces are stationed along the border with Iraq, that's also where terrorists both enter and exit the two countries. Two countries that just happen to be Iran's strategic allies in West Asia. Is the US supporting the terrorists to destabilize these two countries?
Yes, of course. And this is a part of a long-standing American pattern that goes at least all the way back to the war against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, where we support the most radical Salafist groups as a kind of a cat's paw, as a tool of our policy. We've done this in Bosnia and Kosovo and Libya and Syria, and these terrorists are the kind of people that the United States and particularly the CIA likes to support.
Just to add on, just a follow-on question to that, James, is that, do you think that's a deliberate foreign policy, or is the United States repeating this same mistake? You mentioned Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. They start off by saying, well, we're supporting armed groups, for example, with logistics and money and what else, and then these groups turn out to be terrorists.
No, they're not surprised. It's deliberate. They know very well that these groups are terrorists. Look, there was a 2012 memorandum from the Defense Intelligence Agency when General Michael Flynn was the head of that agency. And he was obviously objecting to the policy of supporting these terrorists in Syria, saying that if we keep it up, there will be the creation of a Salafist emirate in eastern Syria. That's what they called it in the memo. And he was asked about this by Al Jazeera. Was this an unintended consequence of our policy? And he said, no, this actually is what we were intending. This is what they wanted to do. So when ISIS, or as they call it, Daesh, appeared in eastern Syria, that was not an unpleasant surprise or an accident. That was the foreseeable and intended result of the policy.
James, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts and your contribution. James Jatras, their former diplomat and foreign policy analyst, joining us live out of Washington, D.C.